Start. Thanks.
I think that's a good idea, Keith. Maybe just give it a minute or two more.
Hi, guys. We're just giving a few minutes, allowing all the guests to be admitted into the Zoom call, and we would start shortly. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We're just waiting for some of the guests to be to find the meeting room and get seated before we begin. Okay, Jirosh, I'm going to begin.
Yes, let's proceed, Keith. Thank you.
Let's get started. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for joining our Energy Finance webinar today. Thank you to each and every one of our speakers. We have 5 of them today, which I will introduce shortly. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution on this very important topic and a very important space of which there's massive innovation that's happening. It's a very broad topic, energy finance, and as such, there's lots to learn, lots of questions. It's a space that is continuously evolving and, like I said earlier, lots of innovation. So this webinar is part of a series. It's a series where the SAEEC, the Southern African Energy Efficiency Confederation, aims to bring to our members, to our industry, so that we can unpack, we can understand, we can demystify the different finance solutions that's available today in the market, enhance our understanding, and of course, why do all of this? But before we kind of get going, it's a bit of house rules. If you guys could, if you're not speaking, put your mics on mute. This is a Zoom platform, so we would appreciate your consideration to the speakers. So like I was saying, when it comes to the reason behind an energy finance webinar, why do we want to do this? Well, I'd like to give you perspectives globally, locally, as well as one personal perspective. And if essentially starting off from a global perspective, last year, the COP26, the Conference of the Parties, saw countries commit to net zero targets, net zero carbon targets. Some countries as early as 2045, some countries as late as 2060, some countries, and most of them, 2050, and some countries, I don't want to mention any names, not setting a target as yet. Some countries have even set legally binding net zero carbon targets. Well, what does this mean? Like, why is this important for South Africa? Of course, our products, our aluminium, our steel, all of the products that we export by our country, that means it has a high carbon content. And the reason is for this is because a lot of our industries rely, and almost all of us rely on our local grid. And our grid is not the best when it comes to the amount of carbon content that's burnt or fossil fuels burnt in order to produce that energy. And as such, if you analyze our grid emission factor, last year it grew from 1.04 to this year 1.08 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. Yes, we're the 12th worst when it comes to carbon emissions in the world. So we've got challenges. We've got challenges in just ensuring that we have a secure energy supply. Yes, our grid is not decarbonizing fast enough, and it's under immense pressure. And so it's up to the private sector. It's up to the private sector to really come to the party. If South African businesses, in order to remain sustainable on the international market, private business needs to step up. We need to get access to these funding solutions and really start implementing projects that will allow and provide for a sustainable future for South Africa. But how? Well, as an association, we always say energy efficiency is always the first line of defense in climate when it comes to the fight against climate change. At the association, yes, you can develop yourself in techniques to reduce energy consumption, international qualifications aligned to the Association of Energy Engineers. And so that we can use energy efficiently so that the next guy can do his business without having load shedding. It's the first step. We've even got an ESCO association. If you're a lonely engineer trying to make a big difference inside in a company, the ESCO association is here to help and guide you. If you want to ensure that your energy efficiency projects are incentivized the correct way, we've got an MVCSA community that will ensure and give you guidance around ensuring your incentives are achieved. We promote females, we promote the youth. We've even got a Thermal Insulation Products Association of South Africa, looking at the building envelope. If you want to even put solar on your roof, there's a solar installer program where you can learn how to put solar on your roof. You can even put solar on the other guy's roof, but you know what? More is needed. Yes, more is needed, and we need it now if we are going to really have an impact. And this morning, if you woke up and put the news on, you'd see that Russia launched an invasion on Ukraine. It is an attack on freedom. It is an attack on democracy, and even as an association and myself personally, I stand in solidarity for the freedom, for the people of Ukraine. And we also note as an association about these global perspectives, these changes that are happening because they have an impact on energy, they have an impact on energy cost. The cost of Brent has already rocketed above the $100 a barrel mark. It's 2014 levels, rising by $6. And this could put more pressure on the need for the entire globe to transition quicker as an energy crisis soon looms in the air as a result of this conflict. Closer to home, yesterday we had our budget speech. Some of the impacts there, we've seen tax rate, the carbon tax rate increased by 7.5% from 134 Rand to 144. A 1 cent rise in the carbon levy on fuel, equaling total of 9 cents per liter. Carbon budget allowance has been removed in 2023. Carbon offset allowance increased by 5% in 2026. The Section 12L carbon tax incentive extended to 2025. Yes, what are you saying? There's a need to transition to zero carbon. Energy efficiency is still the first line of defense. We have incentives that allow us to move towards this transition. Fuel costs are up, and the costs are going up. If fuel costs are going up, that means the business case to fuel energy efficiency is getting stronger by the day. Technology costs are also decreasing, but more is needed. And the latest innovation, apart from energy, in my opinion, is finance. Finance has brought a lot of innovation, and it could build your business, it could build the country. And recently at a dinner party, I was astounded last week when I met a BMW salesman. He sells 3 Series BMWs. And I was shocked at the sales rate of 3 Series BMWs. I'm astounded, and my heart is still aching, because I think we sell more 3 Series BMWs in this country than solar PV rooftop power plants. And I can't understand it. I can't. BMWs, I can't think of something that depreciates faster than a 3 Series BMW. And I'm sure there are other cars out there. But petrol's going up. And this residual finance model is just being taken up. And it's so far the latest thing in finance solutions, but we're still selling so many 3 Series BMWs. I can't understand it. And then I look closer back to home and I look at a PV power plant, and I can see and I can tell you that, well, if we're going to be working from home, what I need is not energy to go to work, it's energy at my house. So the PV business case makes sense. It pays itself off 7 years, with batteries maybe a bit longer. And so the question I ask myself is why, what is the difference here? How are we not promoting this fast enough? And the answer to my question might be, we need more BMW salesmen in rooftop PV solar plants. And so, Dirosh, thank you, our Indian salesman, for arranging this fantastic webinar, in my opinion, because we really need to understand these solutions and create more BMW salesmen in everybody to go out there and start selling the benefit of a sustainable future. It's a big topic. There's lots to learn. And so starting up, we have today is we have lots of speakers. We have speakers from various different areas. We have them from Nedbank. We have Standard Bank with Power Pulse Solutions. We have from the DFI, but these are just some of them. I'm going to start off by introducing our first speaker, Duncan Abel from Nedbank. Financing solar PV solutions. Duncan has been involved in climate change and the renewable energy sector since 2008. The last 11 of which has been in Nedbank, obviously the corporate investment side, and his role is as a principal in the energy finance business unit, focusing on funding projects, not only in South Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and power purchase agreements, private power purchase agreements across. Prior to that, he had been responsible for climate change and carbon project investment and trading. Lots of questions. I hope you've got them written down or ready to nail Duncan with lots of questions. Duncan, I'm sure nothing can faze you, but over to you, Duncan.
Cheers, thanks, Keith. Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen. Just let me know when you can see it.
Coming through. Thanks.
Can see the screen. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So, I mean, as we sort of said there, I sit in the energy finance business unit within the investment bank, or the corporate investment bank at Nedbank. I'm one of a number of different touch points in the bank, and I'll as I go through the slides, I've only got really 2 slides to sort of show you. I'll sort of try and demystify a bit about the various different funding solutions available for solar PV projects, and for that matter, energy efficiency projects within the bank. And I think it's really the biggest issue that the industry faces, and for that matter, the banks face, is trying to get the right people talking to each other. I mean, if you came into the bank with a request for funding for a residential solution, you came to me, I wouldn't be the right person. But what I should be able to do is to direct you to the right people in the bank, who would be best suited to provide you with information around the funding solutions, possibly able to point you in the direction of installers, give you some advice around sort of technical advice as well, and really try and assist you in the sort of the journey for funding your projects. And this works both from the installation side, but also from a Nedbank client side. The bank is split up into various different sort of business units, and those business units are based on our traditional banking clients, which does then mean, as I sort of alluded to earlier, that there are various different touch points for funding of energy projects. We can sort of start off on the left-hand side in our in our traditional sort of retail sort of sector, where to date we've been funding these projects through our home loans business unit. And it's really been a case of approaching the home loans business unit and looking for an extension on an existing home loan. While this has served a purpose and has been very useful for those clients who bank with Nedbank and who have home loans, what it hasn't done is provided a solution to the broader market, as it's obviously for various reasons limited to home loans customers. I don't think it's out in the market yet, but we're about to launch a new funding product through our motor vehicle finance sort of corporation, which will then allow you sort of along similar lines to motor vehicle finance for any people to approach the bank and to request funding from Nedbank for residential sort of solar solutions, and for that matter for energy efficiency solutions as well. And that should be launched within, I think it should be launched in the next couple of months. Similarly, we've got our business banking area, which looks after sort of professional clients and sort of smaller businesses. Although in truth, I mean, some of those smaller businesses are fairly large in size. I think our cutoff is probably about 750 million rands worth in revenue. So it's a fairly large sector with a diverse sort of client network. The solutions there have also been our traditional banking solutions, which we've adapted to allow sort of for funding of energy projects. Typically, our sort of term loan solutions, where in the past traditionally clients would be able to get 5-year funding specifically for solar projects. We've been able to extend that to 10-year funding obviously for qualifying clients. And the advantage there and the aim with doing that is to try and get clients into a cash flow positive, or at the very least a cash flow neutral position from day one, where the savings that you're making from your solar system are at least equal to, if not greater than, the cost of the loan. We're also looking at introducing some asset-backed finance solutions, where we'd be taking a view on the solar system itself, and our ability to extract value from that system if for whatever reason we had to move it. Thirdly, we've probably got the largest property finance business unit in South Africa across all the banks. And again, with that property finance business unit, you'll have a lot of property owners or sort of owners who are approaching the bank for funding. And this is again sort of similar to what we've done in the home loan space, where we simply extend the property finance facility to incorporate whatever the energy solution or the energy requirements are. And again, this extends beyond sort of solar PV to other energy efficiency solutions, includes water solutions as well. In our corporate banking division, and this is typically sort of for listed entities or subsidiaries of listed entities, or for really large private entities. Again, sort of along similar lines to what we've got in the business banking, although we do provide a bit more bespoke financing for these clients, where we look at extending existing facilities for those clients, where they either have term loan facilities, they might have working capital facilities, and they can use those facilities for funding of renewable projects. We then finally get to our project finance business unit. And this is where I sit, where we look at providing structured projects to developers who are looking to own solar or own energy projects. And I'll get a bit more into the detail there, own energy projects, and then to sell that energy through a power purchase agreement or through some sort of offtake agreement to their clients or to off-takers. And these are typically larger projects than what we've seen in the other 4 areas. And again, as I say, the ownership structure is quite different. In this, we're funding a developer, typically through an off-balance sheet or limited recourse structure, whereas the others have been more balance sheet funding the actual user of the system itself. In project finance, we've got really 2 different structures. The one is your traditional project finance facility, and the second is a portfolio funding facility that we've developed. In a project finance facility, simplistically, what we'll do is we'll have a project company that's a special purpose vehicle, a remote vehicle which is ring fenced from other obligations, or ring fenced from the company's balance sheet, and all that entity contains is the energy project itself. And then that project company will enter into a power purchase agreement with the off-taker, whereby the off-taker will commit to purchasing the sort of energy from the project company over a term. And in the past, we've seen these sort of stretching out to 20, 25 years, although of late, we're sort of seeing terms becoming significantly shorter, probably in the 10 to 15 year space, and it won't be long before those power purchase agreements are coming through at less than 10 years. These are typically bigger projects. The announcement last year around the increase in the licensing floor to 100 megawatts has caused a sort of proliferation of new projects coming to market specifically in the solar PV space, but also in the wind space. And most of those larger projects will be funded through your traditional project finance structures. You have the bank plus whoever the sponsor is, the owner of that project company, both contributing debt and equity to the company, and the project company would also enter into sort of EPC and O&M arrangements with third parties to build, maintain, and operate the project. Because these projects are limited recourse, or the structures are limited recourse, and Nedbank would be taking performance risk on the project, they are quite expensive to set up, and there is a lot of sort of legal due diligence, legal paperwork that gets done in setting up a structure like this, and the projects are quite costly, which again typically prohibits sort of smaller projects from being funded along a normal or using normal project finance principles. On this basis, we then looked at developing, or because of that, we looked at developing a portfolio funding model, which borrowed a lot from project finance, but recognized that there was a need for smaller projects also to be financed on a limited recourse basis. So sort of similarly, we'd have a project company set up. Nedbank would provide debt into that project company, and the project sponsor would provide equity. And you're typically looking at a debt to equity ratio of somewhere between 70 to maybe even up to 85% sort of debt, with the equity then providing probably 15 to 30% of the project value. The difference then comes in that we've got multiple projects sitting in that project company, and potentially with multiple different off-takers. The largest portfolio that we currently have has about 75 projects all being funded in the same structure, all being owned by a single project company. And that project company, all it does is owns, operates, and maintains these projects, and then sells the energy from those projects to off-takers. So it's about 75 projects, and we've got about 40 different off-takers spread across South Africa. We're also not limited to a single technology. In that portfolio, we're funding solar PV, we're funding steam, refrigeration, and lighting projects. So it's a fairly flexible solution to provide limited recourse or off-balance sheet funding to smaller projects. And we're finding more and more sort of uptake of these types of structures, continually trying to sort of streamline them, trying to bring down the costs associated to these structures, trying to make them simpler and more cost effective. I mentioned earlier about the lifting of the licensing floor last year, and the massive increase in demand that is driven for energy projects. And with that, it's caused sort of capacity constraints across the entire industry, sort of from funding to the lawyers who are writing all the contracts for this, to the engineers, to installers, to sort of technology suppliers. And collectively as an industry, we've got to continue looking at ways to streamline how we provide our services, to try and make things easier, to try and put templates in place, to try and standardize processes, documents, etc., to make it easier, and from a funding point of view, obviously to make it easier for the likes of yourselves to access funding. I think I'm pretty much going to call it there. I mean, I've only really got the 2 slides, and I'm sort of a couple of minutes, or finished a couple of minutes earlier than expected. I know we've got an opportunity for questions sort of later on. And yeah, I mean, if there are any questions, I'm afraid I see on my presentation I don't have my contact details, but I will circulate those to Keith and them, and I mean, I welcome anybody to either contact me by phone or by email to continue the conversations. And what I can do is, as I sort of said, is try and direct you to the right people in Nedbank who've got the right solutions. It's really not a case that there isn't funding available for these projects. It's just trying to find appropriate funding for the project that you've got. Thank you very much.
Duncan, thank you so much. If you want, guys, there's the chat function. You can also contact Duncan through the chat function. Or Duncan, if you feel comfortable, you can put your details on the chat function. I'm not sure if that can be arranged. But coming up next, and like you rightly said, we will do questions and answers in a panel discussion coming up later. So guys, feel free to write them down and we will deal with them later. Coming up next is Praveshni Siumohan from Standard Bank. Her topic today is about green loans. Prav's background and initial experience is in the chemical engineering field, followed by environmental consulting experience as an environmental assessment practitioner working in the mining sector, chemical and manufacturing industries, as well as the infrastructure sector. She joined Standard Bank in the environmental and social risk team, providing ENS advisory services, internal equator principles reviews, and group-wide ESG client and deal reviews. In 2021, she joined the bank's sustainable finance team, focusing on green, social, and sustainability-linked bonds and loans. So, Praveshni, the floor is yours. We look forward to an interesting talk. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith, and hello to everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Just confirm that you can see it. Right, can you see it?
You can see it 100% in presentation mode. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you so much. So as Keith said, I'm in the sustainable finance team in Standard Bank. However, green financing has been ongoing in Standard Bank since 2014, when we arranged the first green bond in South Africa with the city of Johannesburg. But formally, as Keith said, the team was formed more recently. So in 2019, we established our sustainable finance team. And it's really a team made up of both bankers as well as environmental and social specialists, so that we have both the transactional side and the technical side brought together when we assist our clients with these green, social, and sustainability linked bonds and loans. So just some background. As you can see, sustainable finance has really taken off and has grown exponentially. The 2021 issuance really exceeded by double the issuances in 2020, and analysts are saying that it's probably going to double in 2022. So let's see what happens. This is a fairly new product, but there are market standards that are being established for green, social, and sustainability linked facilities. The International Capital Markets Association has provided principles around bond issuances, and then the Loan Market Association have similar principles on the lending side. There are also taxonomies that are being developed. There's EU taxonomy, and then there's a South African green finance taxonomy that's also being developed, that also provides guidance in terms of what activities would qualify for green funding. Essentially, sustainable finance products have two types. So there's the performance-based product, whether it's a bond or a loan, and then there's the use of proceeds bond or loan. And these can take on a green, social, or if it's both a sustainable nature, and that's kind of the labeling that's used. There are other labels depending on what you are doing. So you could have a climate bond if it has a very strong climate focus, but it's essentially a green facility. And you also now have blue finance, which is actually also green, but just related to water and specifically marine conservation. Okay, I've drawn red circles around the two types on the lending side that would apply to energy efficiency as well as renewable type projects. Okay. In this slide, all I'm trying to show really are the key characteristics of the two types of facilities that you have. And the key difference is that with the green loan, it's a use of proceeds product. So the funds have to be put to a green purpose, and there are various qualifying categories of green that it could apply to. With a sustainability linked loan or a performance-based product, it's corporate lending, but there are certain performance targets that need to be met by the company. So it could be an energy efficiency target, it could be megawatts or kilowatts of renewables put in place, and those sort of targets will be agreed to between the lender and the borrower in terms of their purpose and their strategy, and they need to also be material and ambitious, but also achievable. So sustainability linked loans do take a bit more structuring, if I can call it that. The advantage, of course, is that you get a corporate lend and not a use of purpose lend. Okay. The other sort of key characteristic is that both types require some level of assurance. On the green loan side, it would be the use of proceeds actually being applied to a green purpose. And then on the sustainability linked loan side, it's verification that you've met the targets that we indicated in the loan. These are the use of proceeds categories that are defined by ICMA and LMA. And I've drawn red circles around those that could have an energy efficiency element to them. But as you can see, it's quite diverse, and there are a number of types of activities that can be considered green or social, and with the focus on this webinar being on the green side. Okay, and then just some examples. Some sort of low-hanging fruit. If you're looking at green buildings, which include energy efficiency measures and requirements, those would qualify for green loans. Any reduction of electricity or fuel usage in your operations could qualify for green funding, or they could become targets in a sustainability linked type loan. And some of the examples here of green building standards are EDGE and Green Star, which are quite common in South Africa. There are others, there's LEED and BREEAM, which are used more commonly overseas. Other examples would be energy efficiency ratings. So typically when you buy products that have the AA or A rating, home appliances and the like. So if you have a producer that has these sort of high ratings, they could also qualify for green loans. And then anything with regards to reduction of emissions. So whether it's rooftop solar projects, because you're reducing the use of Eskom, which is associated with coal power, or where you're replacing fossil fuels with renewables, can also then qualify for green loans. And Keith, I've finished quite quickly, but I'll leave it there and I'll answer questions when we get to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Pras. Short, sharp, to the point, and I was writing like a crazy person. Guys, I hope, don't you stress about presentation. Those over here, Gabriel, Motacho, I'm sure will be able to share the content for today, the recording, as well as the presentations to our users through a PDF. So don't you guys stress about that in the chat functions. Focus on some hard questions for our guests. So we can get the conversations going. Next up is Nadia Rauji from Musenzela. She was actually at this talk last year. And Nadia, thank you so much for coming back in and just contributing to the association. We're very, very appreciative of that. And Nadia has experience ranging from FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, to manufacturing and mining because of family interest and involvement in an influential African network called Intra Business Network. Executive Director at Zela advises and facilitates capital raising for SMEs and also mentors SMEs to bring these businesses to bankability. Skills aligned business and analytics, financial business modeling, access to developmental funding. A phenomenal speaker, co-authored the financial guideline for the development of bankable business proposals for clean energy projects. Also named 2020's High Flyers in High Heels. I missed that one. By Top Women's Leaders magazine in entrepreneurs.com, top 50 women to watch list in 2019. She serves as a non-executive director at Senatla Capital and the chairperson for the professional body governing incentive consultants at SA Institute for Taxation. Nadia Rauji, I can see your presentation. If you can just go into presentation mode, and I think you'll be good to go.
Thank you, Keith. Let me try and put it back into presentation mode. It seemed to not go, so let's try that again. Apologies. Is it in presentation mode now?
Perfect, perfect. You're good to go.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Keith, for the introduction, and the SAEC for the opportunity. And good day to all of the audience members. So firstly, what I'd like to discuss today is around bankability, and this is a lot of the work that we do is with respects to projects in general, looking at what bankability is. And for the CSIR and the NCPC, we wrote a guideline on bankability, specifically in renewable energy and energy efficiency, and came up with the 7 criteria for bankability within the sector. And they really are quite similar to any other form of bankability, but I'd like to go through this because at the end of the day, whilst we've heard from our colleagues at the commercial banks around the debt that's available, most debt also requires equity. And at the end of the day, you need to be able to have the right balance of debt, equity, and in that be able to sell a bankable business plan. And I'm sure you've all heard that many times before, a bankable feasibility study to the relevant funders, including the commercial banks and private equity providers, venture capitalists, etc. So we're going to go through the slide and really talk around the 7 principles of bankability and the different types of funding available in the market. And then we'll move from there. So looking at it at the end of the day, credibility of the client. It's the first thing that any funder will look at. And if you go to the commercial bank, the first things that they'll ask for is a long list of requirements, supporting documents to ensure that you are credible, and they can check what your bank ratings are like and how good you are as a client. They'll want to know what you do as a business, your financials, ensure that all of your compliance is in place, etc. And then they'll look at the project itself and look at the technology as well as the EPCM that's being used. And earlier we discussed, one of the presenters discussed the different types of technology that are available and the funding that's available for different types, from solar PV to wind and steam. So really looking at those technologies, what I find in the work that I do in assessing businesses and preparing them for finance is that a lot of businesses, particularly in the energy space, want to promote technology that funders are not comfortable with because it's innovative, it's disruptive, and it can create immense impact. But where a funder doesn't understand the technology and know that there are credible EPCMs that can set up and construct these projects and then manage them, ensure that there's operational management, repairs, maintenance, all of that in place effectively, funders get worried. So today we're talking both about renewable energy as well as energy efficiency. If you think 10 years back, think to renewable energies then. Solar PV was an uncomfortable conversation to be had with any funder. Today, all of the banks have various funding instruments, from property-backed to property finance, asset finance, etc. And we'll go through a few of those different types of funding. Many have been discussed already in today's discussions. We will also talk about the type of cost that you can associate to these different types of finance. What happens to funders is when you come with a disruptive and innovative technology, they get worried. So if you look at energy efficiency in the South African context, energy efficiency is relatively new. It is where solar PV was probably 7-8 years ago. And so it's going to take time for a lot of the energy efficiency projects that are in the market to really get mainstream funding in the way that solar PV is getting that funding today. So I really do appeal to everyone in the audience to sit back and think about what are your short-term opportunities with technology, utilizing technologies that have the appropriate warranties, where EPCs can be brought to the table that have good track record, where funders will feel comfortable in financing the actual build and maintenance of the project. So really, when we look at this, the funders, be it commercial banks on senior debt, which is typical loans, or any of the mezz financiers in the market, the equity providers, the venture capitalists, the private equity providers, they're really going to look very strongly at these first two bankable elements. Is the underlying client who is paying for the solution, paying for this project to be set up and paying the electricity that's generated out of the solar PV solution, are they credible, and is the technology the appropriate technology that they are comfortable with? And that all really also comes down to the feasibility studies. In the feasibility studies, there would be a lot about what can be generated out of that particular technology, what sort of guarantees and warranties can be put in place, an investment feasibility would be done, a site feasibility would be done, EIAs would be required. Is the site appropriate for various types of technologies to be set up? Are there any restrictions? Are there objections from those within the area as it relates to an EIA that would be necessary? What I find on this particular item with a lot of project owners is that there is an assumption that EIAs will simply be provided, and EIAs can take up to 12 months. Now, funders become very nervous when they see that an EIA may be required but has not been obtained as yet because of that lead time. So it's really important to understand whether the site you've identified has the relevant zoning, the relevant requirements, and allows for the technology that you would want to implement, and ensure that the EIA is done by a third party that has the credentials to do so and that the funders will feel comfortable with. Off-takers, we spoke about as part of number one, the credibility of the client. The off-taker is critical as well as the applicant. So specifically when we speak about project finance, we talk about portfolios and EPC that's got multiple projects. That EPC that wants to be funded would need to be reviewed, and the credibility of themselves would need to be assessed. And the underlying off-takers of the project or of the energy, whether it's energy generation or energy savings. So off-takers are critical. And another area, whether it's in the renewable energy space or in any other project, the availability of off-take is critical. And the intention of off-take being secured at the very least when you first go and speak to funders can already put you a step above many others. If you've got a formal contract, an off-take contract, the dates associated to those contracts are going to be critical too. If it's too soon, if you need to be complying and putting up that plant very quickly and you're coming to a funder relatively late, there may be a risk in terms of funder saying, well, you need to put up this project and we won't be able to get through credit committee as quickly as you would like, and therefore they may step away from the project. So timing is really critical when it comes to off-takes and projects. Preparedness. Preparedness is a huge, huge challenge. Project owners are typically working on the off-take and on the technology, putting the site plans together, putting all of the engineering designs together, which are critical, working with off-takers to secure that contract and off-take. And then some of their compliance requirements. The feasibilities are not done in the preparedness. So when it comes to an application being done, these other areas that will be looked at from a track record perspective and preparedness are often not available. And we see this particularly where you're going to funders who are not your main bank. Where you're working with your primary banker, they generally know how good you are and what you do. And they're able to go into your own bank account and see what the trading history is. As soon as you start going away from your primary bank and going to the DFIs, the likes of the Developmental Bank of South Africa, the PIC, the IDC, the DTI for grant funding, these institutions know nothing about you. And so you really need to have all of your ducks in a row. You need to be highly compliant and you need to be able to provide them with all of that information, which can be rather daunting. So we help our clients ensure that they are prepared and that they're putting their best foot forward when going to a funder. So the last thing you want is to go to a funder who's ready to fund you, asks you for a wish list of various supporting documents and evidence, and you don't have it. Those deal makers will lose steam and momentum with the project rather quickly because they need to move on to the project that they can close and take to credit committee. Regulation is a huge one within the sector. We all know it. Regulation is slowly catching up. There's a lot to be done. Make sure that you have strong understanding of whether your project is within regulation, whether all permits and licenses have been obtained, or what the timelines of those permits and licenses will be. Really, really critical element for you to all take into account is regulation. And it was cited through the research that we did for the CSIR and NCPC, that this was one of the biggest hurdles within the renewable energy and energy efficiency space when it came to bankability. And lastly, the size and stage of your project, because this starts determining which funder you can actually go to and which of the different financial products and capital products may be available for you. Looking at debt equity ratios, really looking at different shareholders. And today, my focus today was really around equity and grants. And looking at the equity space, most debt funders in the country would require that you come with an equity check as well, unless you're a blue chip, beautiful company, and they're just wanting to throw money at you. You really do generally need to come in with an equity check. And there are various funders within the equity environment in South African space, a lot who want to participate in renewable energy, but most have very similar criteria when it comes to bankability. Equity is very averse to the new technologies. Equity is wanting to change products and technologies and projects that have a high probability of success, so that the private equity and venture capital firms that put that equity in can actually extract the returns that they need to back to their funders. There are over 27 debt funders in the market that are keen to fund renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. And they all have a range of different commercial arrangements, different tenure rates, size, and fit requirements. The other option on the debt side is to effectively have a lease or PPA agreement with the off-taker, and that also allows you to leverage the off-taker's balance sheet as opposed to your own and their credibility to be able to finance the transaction. Where it comes to incentives, there are a number of DTI cash incentives available, from the Black Industrialist Scheme, the Agro-Processing Support Scheme, the Automotive Investment Scheme, the Critical Infrastructure Program, and many others. Each program has very specific mandates and requirements from an eligibility criteria. But for example, the Critical Infrastructure Program allows for up to 50 million Rand available in grant funding, never to be repaid, no interest to be paid back for renewable projects. The other that really comes out very, very good is the Black Industrialist Scheme, which allows for Black industrialists, majority Black-owned, managed and controlled industrial businesses in the manufacturing space, to invest into new machinery, tools and equipment, which would have energy efficiency attached to it, as well as solar PV and other energy generation technologies, and would allow up to 50 million Rand grant as well. We really do specialize in the grants and incentives. and would be happy to go through more of that with you individually if there are specific projects that you would like to utilize the grants for. There are also tax incentives within the space. Keith mentioned earlier 12J, 12L, 12B. So there are a number of tax incentives, and whilst 12J has had a rocky year, what is nice is that there are still funds that were capitalized through 12J, and they are still looking for projects. So a lot of opportunities within the market, but at the end of the day, all funding providers want to know how you'd be able to repay them, either as in your repayments as debt, and or through the returns they would make from you if they were to provide you with equity. This is a snapshot from the financial guideline that we prepared for the CSIR and NCPC, and you can get it online. It's freely available, and you can just literally type in the source at the bottom of this table. There are 3 types of projects typically in the space. It's either an individual SSEG project, commercial PPA portfolio, or utility scale, each with different types of finance. And I'm going to skip to this slide over here, where through our research, we were able to determine what the cost of capital might be for the different types of finance appropriate to the different types of projects. This is really critical because a lot of people believe that because this is green finance, that it would be cheap finance. It's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of funding in the market, but you need to make sure that the cost of capital that you're putting into your financial models is aligned to what the market actually has in place, and that the tenures that you're looking at in terms of the finance periods are appropriate with the market. Just a little bit about working with us. We would obviously help you in preparing your applications to various funders, both debt and equity, as well as the grant side of things. We help you save time and reduce effort on your side. We have access to information responsiveness through our funders' relationships. We reduce the risk of designing a mandate fit between the project and the funder to meet its specifications, and we have a committed team. Just on that as well, we've arranged over 1.2 billion Rand for the South African market from both local and international funders. So if you are an EPC that's looking to attach finance to your solution, we're happy to have a conversation. There's a little bit about how to get in touch with us. And as Keith said, you don't need to worry. These presentations will be flowing through to you. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. All right. Padlacha, you okay? Okay, cool. All right. Thanks again, Nadia. Thanks for that great detailed explanation on the guide when it comes to actual green projects, funding, when to use equity, when to use debt. Love it. I was writing so much of notes. And please, guys, keep your questions. Presentations will follow, so don't stress about that. Next up, we have Mohammed Saeed. He's from the Development Bank of South Africa. Great topic, green funding solutions from DFIs. Mohammed is a specialist in the climate finance unit at the DBSA. His role is to provide strategic advice to the bank regarding access to various climate financing mechanisms, including conceptualization and development of proposals responsive to the priorities of the DBSA, such as the establishment of a climate finance facility. He also provides advisory services to all the banking sectors regarding climate change matters and maintains continuous dialogues with relevant external climate change partners on behalf of the bank. He holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Cambridge, an MBA from Gibbs. Ladies and gentlemen, Mohammed Saeed with a topic on green funding solutions from DFIs. Over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the organizers for once again inviting DBSA just to share maybe our updates on some of the interventions in terms of supporting climate-related projects, and maybe focusing specifically on energy efficiency and renewable energy. I think before I go into some of the facilities and programs that we've established and currently implementing. I think maybe just some high-level context would help in terms of what is the DBSA's approach when it comes to funding climate projects and how we intend to mainstream climate finance within the DBSA as a DFI. So our journey actually started, I suppose, with firstly, apologies for all the acronyms. My life is full of acronyms, so I'll go through the names, so don't worry about that. So the first one is the Green Fund, GF, which the bank managed since 2012, serving more as a catalytic fund to support, South Africa's transition towards a green economy, focusing mostly on pilot-related projects. And we used to fund a lot of energy-related projects through the Green Fund as well. And recently, we just relaunched the Green Fund, which is now firmly embedded within the DBSA. In the past, we had a separate management committee, and we were managing the fund on behalf of the Department of Environmental Affairs. However, now we follow normal DBSA processes in terms of approving projects through the Green Fund. So that's something that I'll just briefly mention as well. Secondly, by far the largest source of climate finance, in terms of international finance available, public finance, it's the Green Climate Fund. And the way the Green Climate Fund works, as well as another UNFCCC mechanism called the Global Environmental Facility, the GEF. Both the GCF and GF, you have to be accredited in order to access funding, and project sponsors will need to then engage with an accredited entity in order to get support for projects, and historically we have been quite successful in terms of establishing programs that support the renewable energy sector, using both GCF as well as GEF funding. So my talk today, I'll just spend a few minutes just on some of the facilities that we currently established, which involves blended finance mechanisms, where we blend concessional finance from the GCF with DBSA funding to support various sectors. And we were accredited with the GCF since 2015 and with the GF prior to that. And then finally, we also obviously, we use our membership with the International Development Finance Club to look at, innovative financing models and strategies in order to again support South Africa's transition, and not only South Africa, but also Africa's transition towards, a cleaner development pathway. And in this case, we have various partnerships with multilateral development banks. And more recently, we've partnered with AFD in terms of issuing a green bond, which we issued towards the beginning of last year. And we had our second issuance towards the end of last year. And then we also have a green credit line, a climate action credit line with one of the MDBs that we've been, using to support existing climate finance facility. And then just very briefly, we also use, the Global Climate Innovation Lab to also get a sense of, what innovative models can be adopted in order to once again support and unlock climate finance, especially in terms of crowding in private sector capital, which is quite key in order to meet, our climate objectives and Paris alignment objectives. So just briefly, I'll just go through maybe two programs funded by the Green Climate Fund, as well as co-funded and matched by DBSA. Both programs are credit enhancement facilities designed to de-risk projects in order to attract, commercial funding in the form of senior debt. So the first one is the Climate Finance Facility, which was a facility developed by the DBSA. We worked with the coalition of green capital based in New York, with the initial kind of concept. But ultimately, it was designed in order to manage this facility within the DBSA and use this facility as kind of a stepping stone to mainstream climate finance within the bank. So essentially, it's a debt facility where we try to catalyze private sector capital to support both climate mitigation and adaptation projects. And I'll talk about the sectors in a moment. I'm not going to go into the details around, the evolution of the CFF, but suffice to note that this was an important facility for us in terms of, once again, transitioning what we do as a bank. Before, the Green Fund was kind of a ring-fence fund, not a very huge facility. And, it had its own mandate. Whereas with the Climate Finance Facility, we use the DBS's accreditation with the GCF to mobilize, $55 million to set up this facility from the GCF, which is matched by DBSA, in order to provide credit enhancement. And the two products that we offer are essentially first loss or subordinated debt, as well as tenor extension. And this was based on some of the engagements we had with the big commercial banks, during the conceptualization of the CFF. And I think a lot of the colleagues, in this call, might have been involved in some of those engagements, with the individuals involved in setting up this particular facility. And then, we also try to ensure that, there is additionality. So the CFF would not fund projects that would typically be funded by commercial banks, and they're looking at CFF purely as a means of increasing their margin. So that's not what the CFF is about. It's about de-risking projects and ensuring that there is a need for credit enhancement, and provide that credit enhancement in order for private sector to come in and provide the bulk of the senior debt, which is up to 50%. And then 30% would be in the form of subordinated debt through the CFF, and the balance would be kind of, equity from the project sponsors. In terms of the structure of the CFF, it's, as I said, it's a facility which is housed within DBSA. So we follow normal DBSA credit approval processes. However, we just added a additional layer where we have a project steering committee just to evaluate the climate credentials of the project, which is absolutely key in order to qualify for CFF funding. And it has to be aligned with the criteria of the Green Climate Fund as well, since it's co-funded by the GCF. And we use a variety of channels, to source deals. So RFPs, people are aware of the facility, they would approach us. We've engaged with the commercial banks in terms of their pipeline. So, we are open to a wide array of channels in order to secure deals, that could be supported by the CFF. In terms of the focus areas, as I said, it's a fairly broad facility covering both mitigation and adaptation. On the mitigation side, renewable energy is obviously quite key, as well as energy efficiency projects, based on, the market study that was undertaken when we put this particular concept together and proposal together. And what we have found is, a lot of the initial pipeline of projects, covers renewable energy. So the first two approvals that we've approved to date for the CFF involves, rolling out, rooftop solar PV on retail centers. And the second project that we just got the approval for and in fact signed the contract, it's around green social housing, where you're looking at both energy efficiency and water efficiency interventions. And then, of course, on the adaptation side, it is purely around, the water sector. So all these areas are aligned to DBSA's kind of core mandate. Very briefly, just another program, which is quite key, I think, for this forum. And, in terms of the discussions to date, it's around a dedicated program supporting embedded generation projects. And once again, we went to the Green Climate Fund to set up this particular program to support embedded generation projects in South Africa. And the idea behind this particular program was to kind of find an alternative procurement mechanism for renewable energy outside the REAP program. So, we want to support PPAs that are not backed by sovereign guarantees. And we do this, once again, by offering, credit enhancement, whether it's subordinated debt, as well as, providing long tenor loans. And there's also a component, where we provide part of the GCF funding goes towards, supporting triple B equity financing, very similar to the structure that was used for the REAP program. Again, not too much detail around the difference between a typical project finance structure and, a renewable energy project supported through REAP, through Egypt. which is the Embedded Generation Investment Program. I'm just using the acronym, it's not the country. You can see on the right-hand side, the right column, with the Embedded Generation Program, we expect 50% of the debt to be senior debt, and then the balance would be a combination of subordinated debt, 20%, and then 30% equity contribution, which would also be part of that first loss tranche coming from this particular facility, which is co-funded by DBSA and GCF. The eligibility criteria for this program, we recently launched a RFP last year. I think it was in August. We had a tremendous response. I think there were 51 responses. Only 5 projects, met the criteria in terms of what was required, in terms of, supporting those projects in terms of stage of development. But we're looking at supporting solar PV and wind only, and projects above 10 megawatts and below 75 megawatts, even though, the IRP, provides, support or defines embedded generation projects in terms of, not needing, let's say, a NERSA license up to 100 megawatts, if I recall. But we had to limit ourselves to a project size that, or capacity size that the Green Climate Fund was amenable to. And so these are some of the requirements which I'm happy to share with you later. So, this was a strategic partnership that was quite key, in terms of setting up and implementing these particular facilities. I think one challenge we are facing with both programs is the funding from the Green Climate Fund comes in US dollars. And the structure in terms of trying to introduce a hedging mechanism is quite challenging in terms of, the funds do not come directly to DBS's balance sheet. So we're trying to overcome those hurdles with the Green Climate Fund. And I think it's a common challenge which a lot of other entities are facing with the GCF. So we hope, we can sort that out fairly soon. I just wanted to briefly just mention the Green Fund. I recently mentioned that this particular fund was relaunched, a couple of weeks ago. We issued an RFP, and these are some of the areas that we are looking at, which includes energy generation and storage. We're looking at biogas technologies as well. Possibly more early stage projects compared to, let's say, what the Climate Finance Facility or the Embedded Generation Program would look at. So I think this is kind of more geared towards projects that are, at an earlier stage of development. So you're happy to look at the RFP. I think the call is still open, and we offer a combination of instruments. There could be grants, recoverable grants, debt, and mezzanine debt as well. And I'm happy to share the details of the colleagues that are managing the Green Fund. Lastly, my last few seconds, we just recently designed another program, and you will notice that our approach as DBSA is a programmatic approach. We don't go to the Green Climate Fund for an individual project. We try to look and design initiatives that are sector-wide, and where we can get an approval for a facility or program, and then support sub-projects where we use our accreditation with the GCF, in order to give them comfort that DBSA processes will be used in order to ensure that it's aligned with GCF requirements. So recently we've designed this particular program, which I think some of the colleagues on this call, we engage with various banks as well around the concept. It's still work in progress, but it's around an energy efficiency program for South Africa to complement, the NAMA facility, but to support predominantly SMMEs and to design a financial product where we once again crowd in private sector in the energy efficiency space by getting some sort of guarantee from the GCF, as well as a grant facility to set up a technical assistance hub, which will then, support, energy audits for projects and also assist commercial banks in terms of evaluating some of these projects, which may not be, let's say, a part of the normal, typical DD type of project that they do. So that was the intention. I think we received valuable feedback from Nedbank towards the end of last year, or perhaps early this year, and as well as other commercial banks. And we hope to incorporate those comments in order to refine the design of this program and hopefully go back to the Green Climate Fund for an approval. So I think that's it from my side. There are obviously other programs outside the energy space that we're looking at, but I think that's for another day and perhaps another audience if you are interested. We're looking at solid waste, we're looking at water reuse, but I think this might be of interest, electric mobility, which I think you might be interested in as well. So thank you so much.
Mohammed, thank you so much for a contentful presentation. So much to absorb in. So guys, if you want the big bucks, do the big projects, have an impact that's quite significant. Mohammed Saeec, DBSA, that's the guy to go and speak to. Get that Green Climate Fund money. But in the interim, we're back over here trying to provide a full picture for finance. And our last speaker, but certainly not the least, Jaco Berger. He's going to be talking to us about innovations the Standard Bank has been making in the digital enablement of decentralized energy solutions. There's an app, it's called Power Pulse. Very exciting. Jaco has got 25 years experience in banking, financial services, predominantly in the Standard Bank Group, in CIB, also known as Corporate Investment Banking Division. His career with the group, wonderful opportunities, different roles in South Africa and the African market. And a couple of years ago, a small group of like-minded professionals formed an innovation division that explores the possibilities in the digital economy. And he's privileged. He was mentioning on how he is privileged to lead a team of corporate ventures that discover new opportunities within the entrepreneurial flair to move the organization forward, not constrained only to financial services, but the team tackles meaningful challenges with enthusiasm and a focus to make an impact with purpose. Talk to us more, Jaco, about Power Pulse and what Standard Bank has created there.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you so much for the association for having us. I've been fascinated by the previous speakers, but really, Keith, today I really want to tell you a story about how we got together as a couple of like-minded individuals, as you said, to say, how can we tackle big challenges? We looked at the energy landscape, not only in South Africa, but on the continent at large. And we said, how is it possible that clients, off-takers, energy users do not have reliable and cost-effective energy solutions that really talks to their need in a very rapidly changing regulatory and technical environment, so that we can grow this continent. In the global context of decarbonization and decentralization and digitalization, we said, surely there must be something done. So we started with a couple of people, and we really put together a team to explore this landscape. It was actually just when COVID started, so it's about 2 years ago. Just before that, we got a lot of people from the industry together, what we call innovation sort of blitz, to think about all the challenges and think about solutions. Then COVID started, we got the team together in the virtual world, and we tackled this challenge with more than 100 interviews throughout the industry. And we tried to ascertain, so what are the constraints? What are the pains? What are the frictions? What are the real problems? And I'm sure for this audience, no surprise that, yes, energy security, energy cost, the regulatory environment, the technology, the legal environment, obviously education, awareness, skills, that's also very prevalent in this forum. And access to finance and funding has all been massive pain points for most of these stakeholders that we've engaged with. So to find challenges are often not too difficult. People are quite happy to talk about challenges, but to find a solution is a little bit more tricky. And for us to find solutions that's commercially viable is also a very exciting challenge. So we've tested a huge number of different business models, different solutions, and we really decided as a starting point to start with solar, and start with solar in the corporate and industrial arena. It's 80% of the market, as you guys all know, and growing at the same rate as maybe some of the other sectors. And we found that for people to make a decision with solar PV, given the financial implication, given the uncertainty of suppliers, EPCs, given the awareness, and very often very difficult decision-making criteria, it's very difficult for them to transition and commission a solar PV project. So we, after about 6 months, we started with solutioning. And after another 6 months, we started the business. And after a couple of months, we had a digital enabled business. So we started with the business first, and then we digitally enabled it. And I'm very proud to say that in the first 4 months, we started making revenue, and the acceptance of the market has been quite pleasing. I want to share what it is, and then I'll tell you where we're going and what the impact has been thus far. So if you allow me, let me just share a small video for anyone to get a better appreciation for what we've created.
Thinking on bold and innovative solutions that shine a
It worked just now. Let me try again.
a light on better, smarter ways of harnessing the power of electricity. At Standard Bank, we aim to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy solutions on our continent by providing an easy-to-use digital platform designed to bring clients and suppliers together in the quest to make the best environmental decisions and enhance their commercial sustainability in an uncertain power landscape. It's time to switch on to Power Pulse. Welcome to the future of energy. Here's how it works. Our Power Pulse platform is the starting point on your journey towards a renewable and sustainable energy solution. And it all begins right here. With your personalized sign-in to our information portal. You'll find useful and enlightening links to case studies, features, news, and stories that will energize your own quest to put your power needs to work. You'll learn about our own experience in the decentralized energy field. You'll see the innovative products and projects we've put in place. And you'll get to meet the trusted partners who'll help you along the way. Got any questions about products, systems, partners, and solutions? You'll find the answers on our handy FAQ page. Then it's time to get the show on the road by steering your own energy solutions project. All you have to add is your project. Give it a name. Upload an image for easy visual reference and fill in all the relevant details on the series of pages that follow. Where is your project based? What is your average monthly electricity spend? What is your average electricity tariff? And so on. Once you've provided all this information, we'll give you an answer as to whether your intended energy project is economically feasible or not. In this first phase of your Power Pulse application, you'll also be asked important questions about your funding needs and your choice of solutions provider. Congratulations! You're switched on and ready to move to the next phase. You're on your way to a bright new solar future. In the background, our Power Pulse concierge team at Standard Bank will complete your needs analysis report based on your answers and will send you insights about the feasibility of your project site. And this is what the feasibility report looks like. It applies broad market assumptions to give you a workable energy solution with detailed insights into estimated electricity cost savings, the potential tax benefits, and the likely funding costs. Once you're in this phase, you can go back to the dashboard at any time to keep a check on the process of your journey and the state of your project. Here you can upload any required supporting documentation for verification by our concierge team. After that, it's on to what we call the matchmaking process, putting you in touch with our trusted suppliers and partners as you get prepared for that all-important site visit. You can find out everything you need to know about our suppliers and schedule a visit for when it suits you best. We'll coordinate and schedule the visits for you, following which we'll prepare a detailed comparison report looking at costs, savings, equipment, cash flow forecasts, and more. You can access the full proposals and accept them if they work for you. At this point, you can talk to us about funding as our team gets ready to show you that whatever your energy needs, whatever the size of your project, with Power Pulse from Standard Bank, it can be.
So we've created a business that really orchestrates facilities. Oh, goodness. My apologies.
We can hear you
Apologies for
clearly,
that.
Jaco.
Apologies for that. The next video was about to go. I was really just reflecting on launching to the market, and our realization is that it's still, whether you're a small solar PV project or a large one, it's still an investment decision. And it's still filled with uncertainty and also driven by business confidence. So I must say we've been blessed with good growth and with great client feedback. Maybe just to reflect on some, the one client told us we've saved them 6 months in assessing EPCs, comparing the proposals and the like. The other financial director told us that she actually presented to a board and she felt she knew what she was talking about, even if she didn't know a lot of the technicalities. And I think the most compelling thing for us, people said they didn't expect that from the bank. And for us, our solution is irrespective of funding. Sure, if the funding is required, our bank, and I'm sure Duncan and all the commercial banks have got big balance sheets with appetite. But as Nadia says, sometimes quite expensive funding. But be it as it may, it's irrespective of funding. And to remove the friction point and time and uncertainty really gives off-takers and energy users the confidence to go into solar PV. Where we're heading, we've found great opportunity. We started with the corporate and industrial segment, as I said. There's obviously demand in residential, quite a fragmented, double-sided market. And we've just completed the POC. We think we are well placed. I think everyone thinks the economic underlying opportunity is there. We'll test the market. There's also great opportunity for us in optimization, metering and monitoring supply and demand for the installed base, and also aggregating demand to procure maybe panels or the like at more competitive price to reduce the cost of the equipment. All in all, we started out with all the stakeholders. We found a starting point. We found it to be commercially viable and really helping to accelerate the growth in the industry. But ultimately, all the participation of the participants will make this whole system more efficient. And I think that's really the small contribution we want to make to businesses and to participants in the system, to make sure that everyone benefits, share in the value, and ultimately make a fantastic environmental impact. Keith, thank you so much.
Jaco, thank you for a great presentation. Lovely videos, and thanks for walking us through how the app works it's nice the way the video unpacks it and shows the process. And for those that are not very strong technically, some guidance in that area. And I love the stories and the case studies. Thank you so much. We're now going to get into a panel discussion. Motachu, can you just help me out over here? All of our guest speakers, if you guys could put your cameras on. So our audience can view you guys. Right, don't be scared. Okay, lots of questions, guys, and I think the chat function is still open. You guys can pop the questions in the chat function as it comes up, and we will address the question to our various speakers. So, all right, let's get going. I've got some questions over here that's been being sent to me on WhatsApp. So, right, what sort of pricing benefit does one get for green funding, and what is the benefit?
Shall I answer that, Keith?
Yes, please, Pravesh.
So the market is seeing a pricing benefit for both green and sustainability linked loans. We're seeing something between sort of 5 and 10 basis points against a vanilla type loan. So that's kind of what we're seeing. On the bond side, the margin can be larger, and it seems that investors are willing to take a knock in order to support, funding of green initiatives and green assets.
Thanks. And with regards to external assurance, who does this and who bears the cost?
Right. So the client bears the cost for the external assurance. And the reason the assurance is there is that we want to avoid greenwashing, of these loan types. So if we're saying that a green loan is going to be used for a certain green purpose, whether it's pollution prevention or energy efficiency or putting in renewables, we want to know that the funds were used for that purpose. If it's a sustainability linked loan and there are certain targets that were associated with the funding, we want to know that those targets have been achieved and they need to be independently assured. Now, there's different cost factors for assurance. What the market is seeing, which ends up being quite cost effective, is that you add on this assurance to your normal assurance. So you are going to get audited on your financials, and quite a few of the bigger auditors do include and can include these sort of environmental assurance requirements as well. Alternatively, you can use a good consultant that is acceptable to the lender, or a ratings agency can also do it.
Thank you, Praveshni. Going to Nadia. What should I have in place to raise finance for my portfolio as an EPC?
Great question. Thanks, Keith. So what's really important is that as an EPC, the credibility of yourself is really important. So all of the track record requirements, annual financial statements, audited if you need to be audited financials, and showing that you've got a track record of implementing good projects and you're able to do so. So that's number one. It's that preparedness, that track record of yourself as an EPC. And then the other really important one is a good pipeline of good clients, where you've actually got PPAs already signed up, and that those PPAs are commercially viable, which also accommodate for the cost of finance. So what a lot of project owners and sponsors do is they don't accommodate for the cost of debt and or equity in their commercial agreements and arrangements with their off-takers. And then they end up going to the funders and expecting the funders to come in at the price that they need the funder to come in at. But funders themselves have costs and have a cost of capital, and they need to put a premium on top of it, and there's risk associated. So they'll look at you as an EPC and say, have you done a good job in the past? Do we know you? Is there a black mark? And I'll tell you that that's one of the big challenges. There are a lot of EPCs that have, unfortunately, had challenges in the learning curve. So if you are looking to establish a portfolio and raise capital for that portfolio, have a big brother, see if you can partner with a good EPC and build out of that. So if you've got clients, but you don't have the track record, buy the track record. If you've got the track record, but you don't have clients, buy the clients and create strategic partnerships that are going to be financially viable for yourself and funders.
Thanks, Nadia. And if I'm responsible for energy security and efficiency in my company, which is a large corporate, what sort of funds are available if we don't have Black ownership?
Okay, so I suppose this is with respects to government funding. So most of the government funders and institutions will look at compliance of BBBE at the very least. Many of the green funds will have indulgences around the level of BBBE compliance or ownership levels. And then there are certain funds that would only be available to Black-owned parties. So we spoke about the Black Industrialist Scheme earlier. For example, there it's a 50 million rand grant for Black-owned manufacturers. But then you've also got the Critical Infrastructure Program, which doesn't require Black ownership necessarily, and would allow for a level 6 to be the BBBE level. So it really does depend. And I would say that if you are in that position, chat to us, let's understand your business, your requirements, and we can see what might be available. Similarly, DBSA, IDC, they would all have certain funds that would be allowed for Black parties, but majority are actually available for those who are not Black owned, but require compliance and empowerment built into the package.
Thanks, Nadia. Thank you so much. I've got a lot of questions for Nadia and Pravs over here. I want to switch it up a bit. Yaku, you were fresh off the boat in terms of your presentation. How's the adoption rate of PowerPulse been, and what do you think is the next plan in order to improve the adoption rate for this important application that you guys got in the market?
Keith, thank you so much. As I said, we are growing weekly. You know, when people talk about digital businesses, they always think about acceleration and the hockey stick. We are growing at a rapid rate. We're getting like 10 clients a week. Our projects are growing in size. And I must also say complexity, which is fantastic for the EPCs. I think the critical thing for us is very often people also test anything, you know, and we've seen from clients, they say, okay, but let's do this site. I don't know why, but they always give us this site where no one ever has gone to, but we go there, or the EPCs go there, and they test us. And once they've done one, you know, they refer and they do others. So our growth has been great, and as I say, we look forward to not only, you know, growing our exploration in South Africa, but also in the rest of the continent.
Thanks, Yaku. And I've got an open question over here for the panel. Can the panel comment on any experience with heat purchase agreements based on commercial solar thermal projects? Do you believe funders have appetite for this type of technology?
Maybe I'll take up there. So,
thanks.
I mean,
Duncan.
the solar thermal technology itself, I mean, it's been around for a long time, and we've funded solar thermal, I mean, sort of projects. With regards to heat purchase agreements, we have a variety of different sort of steam and refrigeration offtake agreements that we're sort of funding. It's really a case of, I mean, the structures that we have in place are by their nature sort of technology agnostic. We don't, I mean, as long as you can come up with a credible revenue stream with a credible off-taker, we can put a structure in place. The technology itself, I mean, it's difficult to say just off the top of my head that we're comfortable with it until we've done some sort of investigation. If it's something that is commonplace, we probably would be. If it's not, well, we'd probably do some sort of investigation. The problem that comes in is that those investigations typically come at a cost, and it's not going to be the bank who's going to pay for those costs. It's going to be the developer who's trying to bring that new technology to market, and that can cause issues sort of with early stage or sort of new technologies looking for funding.
And perhaps I can add to that, Duncan. So in the research that we did, what would happen is, whilst the technology might be known in another country because it hasn't been utilized in South African context, there was hesitance from funders to actually want to utilize that as the technology itself for various reasons. One, the technology might not have been tested in the South African economy and environment. Two, the EPCs haven't used that, haven't built with those specific components and inputs. And then three, there just wasn't the availability of skills for the maintenance and the availability of parts in South Africa. So from a risk perspective, there was a view of, we're happy to do heat purchase agreements, but is the technology that's going to be used proven, and is there enough risk mitigators available in the South African context? And a lot of the guys actually said, one of the funders, the deal makers that we spoke to in the research said, yeah, we do a lot of heat purchase type arrangements. It just doesn't necessarily come out specifically as a heat purchase. It's then just a standard, the technology is known, and it's not registered specifically at the banks as a heat purchase agreement transaction. So those were some of the comments that came back out of the research we did for CSIR.
It's maybe also worth noting that, I mean, if we're talking around sort of technologies and whether the bank would fund those specific technologies, it's typically an issue where we're taking risk on the technology. So if we're funding on the back of a power purchase agreement and our only source of, or the only source of the repayment of the loan is the revenue generated by that power purchase agreement, then the technology becomes crucial. But if we're providing a loan on somebody's balance sheet, or with recourse to someone's balance sheet, then the technology itself is less of an issue. We still want to understand it, but we're not taking risk on the technology itself. It's also important to realize that when we've been talking here, I mean, sort of as sort of the, I suppose, sort of the recognized or commercial and sort of funding sector, but there are a lot of other sort of sources of funding out there who have a different risk appetite and are maybe more open to sort of funding new technologies, new ideas, new opportunities. And it's only once things become, I mean, there's this term which has been thrown around and sort of being bankable. It's only once things have been bankable, they've been demonstrated that you typically find commercial banks sort of funding on scale and taking those opportunities up to scale.
And thanks for that, because there was another question in the chat that speak to technology advancements. Does innovations in green energy make it, more or less risky to invest while it progresses? And I think it's important for us to keep up with technology advancements. And like you're saying, there's different vehicles for those types of advancements. So thank you for that. Climate finance side, what and why is subordinated debt, and are these specific ratios regarding relationship across debt instruments? Sorry, I just read it as it came in.
Yeah, and I think it was probably directed to I suppose some of the facilities of the DBSA. I'm happy to share more details. Obviously, it's project specific, but obviously we subordinate ourselves in terms of cash flows. So the whole idea is, the senior debt providers, will be paid first, but the conditions for subordination, are specifically linked to cash flows in terms of the other aspects. We are pari passu with the senior debt providers, but I think maybe the best thing is to have a specific discussion just to go through some of the ratios that we we may consider, because we apply normal standard DBSA kind of credit approval processes. But I just wanted to maybe on that particular point just mention some earlier question, which was, I think, I think Standard Bank responded as well. In terms of the concessionality when it comes to green finance, so what we normally do is when we try to mobilize your United Nations, your UNFCCC finance mechanisms, that funding comes with high concessionality. So you get typically, 1% or 2% in dollar terms. And what we then do is blend that with our own cost of funding, bearing in mind that as DBSA, we cannot benefit from the concessionality that GSA provided. It gets passed on directly to the end beneficiaries. But nonetheless, even though our cost of funding might be quite higher than, let's say, some of the commercial banks or your multilateral development banks, the blended rate is still deemed to be quite competitive. And especially if you use DBS's contribution from a climate action credit line, which is also quite concessional. So I think that's how we've been using the concessional green finance from these international players to support projects and ensure we can fund, let's call it a green premium in certain cases where the cost for introducing green interventions may be quite high in the short term, but obviously you see the benefits of the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you to all of our speakers. We're very conscious of time. The event was supposed to end off in about 3 minutes. I'm going to hand over to Dirosh in a few minutes for a closing from the SAEC. All of your questions are very valid. The presentations will be distributed to all of you. Our speakers will have their details, hopefully in the presentations if you want to contact them, which if your question wasn't answered and if you'd like some personal response for your question, I'm sure our speakers will be able to get back to you on any of those questions. But unfortunately, I am respectful of your time. And as such, Dirosh, are you ready to close the event?
Very happy to pick it up from here. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Dirosh.
So firstly, to our esteemed and presenters and panelists, thank you for your contribution. Those were certainly very insightful pieces that you've shared with us. I think to the audience that's joined us, thank you very much for taking the time to gain these insights, and hopefully it's added a lot more depth to your understanding around the funding environment. So Duncan, Prav, Nadia, Mohammed, and Yaku, I think collectively you've really given a good landscape view of the energy funding space, and hopefully this helps drive the correct understanding in the industry and helps the developers and the contributors and the drivers behind the sector succeed in finalizing projects going forward. So thank you all for your time. And what we will do is there will be an email that goes out. There will be a portion where we'd reach out to you to provide some feedback to us, just so that we can improve in these webinars going forward. If there's anything, or if there's complimentary notes that you want to drop us, you're welcome to do so. And we will share and circulate the details of the panelists or the relevant teams. And you're welcome to reach out to them directly as in need. So thank you all. And on that point, we can adjourn. And Keith, thank you very much for moderating as well as you did, and giving us the good insights at the outset. Thank you all.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Dirosh, for arranging such a great session. I learned so much. Thank you, sir. This is all on you. Well done, Dirosh. Thank you so much. And thank you, speakers. Lovely content. I'm going to package all of these webinar series, and hopefully we'll get some good content out to our members, industry, and help the association, help the industry more important. Thank you. Thank you all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good.
Thank you, Nadia.